Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into the CBS article. So Trump is essentially suing CBS for 20 billion, claiming that CBS manipulated or edited an interview with Harris and him in 2024. So it comes as CBS's parent company, Paramount, essentially seeks government approval for a merger, and CBS and Paramount reportedly felt the pressure from the situation. And last month, longtime 60 Minute producer Bill Owens stepped down.
We pursued for 57 years are often controversial. Lately, the Israel Gaza war and the Trump administration. Bill made sure they were accurate and fair. He was tough that way. But our parent company, Paramount, is trying to complete a merger. The Trump administration must approve it. Paramount began to supervise our content in new ways. None of our stories has been blocked, but Bill felt he lost the independence that honest journalism requires. No one here is happy about it, but in resigning, Bill proved one thing. He was the right person to lead 60 Minutes all along.
And just this month, CBS News CEO Wendy McCullen also resigned. Reportedly, it's over internal tensions around Gaza coverage and political interference. But it's good to see not everyone is backing down in this situation. One group involved in the merger has actually threatened to take CBS to court if they were to cave to Trump's demands. They're calling it what it looks like to them, which is bribery. And if that argument sticks, it could seriously shift the conversation around press freedom in addition to political influence in the media. So I'd love to unpack this a little bit more. Nolan or Dickie, in terms of free press, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to media ownership and corporate mergers and what does or doesn't get aired, especially when political or legal threats are involved.
Yeah, I'll just say, and then Dickie can jump in. I'll just say off the bat that the Trump 2.0 is interesting for media scholars for numerous reasons. And I had Bill Houston on the show last week, and we kind of touched upon this. But I've spent a career, I think, rightly criticizing the corporate media for getting very important stories absolutely wrong. I mean, I was a college student when they lied about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that a lie that killed millions of Iraqis and thousands of Americans inspired me to learn more about news media. And since then, I've seen the mishandling of COVID or the Russiagate nonsense, or you can go on and on down the rap, or Biden's cognitive abilities. And I think a lot of it always has to do with the corporate ownership model. These corporations have profits to make, and since the 1980s, we've allowed a handful of corporations to control 90% of news media. About six corporations control internet traffic, and I think media scholars do a really good job of criticizing how these companies would never report something that would hurt their bottom line, right? So if you're like a defense contractor like GE and you also own NBC, you don't want NBC to be an anti-war network, right? So we make those connections. But we miss another connection, which is the political connection, which is your interests are also vested in the political parties. And so a lot of these companies kind of align themselves with one political party or figure or another, and they offer favorable reporting to that side and negative reporting to the other side. And I think that's why I say we're kind of in a weird situation because I've always criticized the news media for doing that and getting things wrong. But I've also criticized elites in power like Donald Trump or Elon Musk, and now those elites in power are at war with that corporate media. So it's difficult to pick a side, but I think, ideologically, as someone who supports a free press and thinks it's a necessary pillar to a democracy, I would gladly take a corporate press with all of its problems over no press at all.
Yeah, yeah, it is hard to kind of choose a side of who to root for. I mean, I agree. I think I would prefer any type of press versus no press. But it is whether it's a press that leans Democratic or a press that supports the conservative, the Republican side. I think the fact that it sort of wobbles back and forth, it shows that they really it's not it's more about the profits. Like they will, go with where the breeze, blows them, or however that saying goes. It's Yeah, I mean, I certainly in these times it really makes me kind of appreciate the independent journalists. I know it's a really hard landscape to make a living in, but those citizen journalists, those amateur journalists, like it without them, it would be yeah, without them, I don't know if even a corporate press would totally be worth it. And maybe that's a little bit radical, but it just the fact that the loyalty goes both ways of yeah, it's hard to really feel like yeah, pick a side really.
Yeah. And I know that we care about these things, I think, because we're either media literacy scholars or philosophers or people who are really invested into academia. I'm wondering for like the just like citizens and people who are kind of just watching the news on casually, like when politicians accuse news outlets of manipulation, how can people and how can the public like critically evaluate those claims? Or what are like easy ways to evaluate those claims? Like, should they go to more independent news sources, as you're saying, Dickie, or are there other things that they can do to kind of be aware of?
I think, I think the public does care. I do think the public's in a weird place though,
Mm,
for two reasons. One, since the 1970s, conservatives have tried to dismiss all media as having a liberal bias, as if multinational corporations could possibly be liberal. But that still, people believe that nonsense. Number two, and this is the part that I think news outlets themselves have to wrestle with. When the internet came out, they made the mistake of giving their product away for free initially, and it's conditioned a lot of audiences to think journalism has no value, that it's just kind of
mm,
like this free thing we share and virtue signal with. And at the same time, you do have these cataclysmic failures that I mentioned earlier by news media. So I think there's a lot of people that kind of draw that incorrect conclusion that we need to get rid of all media and just depend on individuals. There is a lot that, like Dickie said, citizen journalists can do. I mean, they were really responsible for a lot of the Black Lives Matter coverage, for example. And I've always said, I think it's all of the above. You need that citizen journalism. You need wealthy news outlets that can afford things like lawsuits and to do complex journalism. You need international journalism, local journalism, new media like podcasting. I think all that stuff is needed. But audiences, I think, need to be reminded of the importance of news media, and hopefully that lesson's learned before it's gone.
mm.
But it occurs to me there's also another story here I want to get in this segment because I think it's interesting about the clampdown. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth of Fox News fame noted on May 23rd he issued a memo that they're going to tighten restrictions on reporters at the Pentagon. So under the new policy, journalists have to be accompanied by a Department of Defense approved personnel when they conduct in-person interviews. And this seems especially hypocritical coming from the administration that called themselves the most transparent administration in history. But, I think it also speaks to just the ways in which this administration wants to manage the press. And for all this talk about Doge and cutting budgets, this new one big beautiful bill that's not beautiful, it actually puts more money in Pentagon spending. So this is going to spend more money while cutting revenue in the form of taxes, and the public's going to know really very less about where that money is going than they already know. The Pentagon constantly fails audits because the reporters are going to be managed by the Defense Department. So I think this is also an interesting aspect to kind of Trump's war in the press.
I mean, it's wild the amount of leakers that um uh, are still there. I mean, I know that there's a sort of paranoia in the Pentagon. You had all these firings a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago of people who were very close to um Defense Secretary Hegseth, and yeah, it's they're sort of turning in on each other. But yeah, I mean, thank God for the leakers.
Hey Detoxers! Thanks for tuning in. You can find Disinfo Detox on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Every click helps grow the community and keeps those tech overlords happy. Detox complete.